back. In our last video we looked at creating a tonal scale, so this thing, and I hope you actually did it, because this is actually really important to get into an understanding of what painting is all about. Understanding how dark or how light something is will help you understand how to push things forward and move things back, that kind of thing. This is what you do in painting. If you are an abstract painter, you don't necessarily need to be, you might not want to be pushing things forward and back, but it is essential that you understand how it works, so that if you do want to do that, you can create that in your abstract pieces as well. And tone is the thing that's going to do it for you, and that's why we create that tonal scale. It's a learning exercise. It's not something that you need to continually do throughout your life and continually create tonal scales and tonal scales. There are painters out there that do that. I don't do it. I learned what a tonal scale was about. I learned what a dark or light color did, and then I use it on the fly. So in this video, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at how to use the tonal scale we just created, and we're going to create a three-dimensional ball, a sphere, on a two-dimensional surface using those tones. And then I'm going to show you how I actually paint, not using a tonal scale, but still understanding how tone works. So understanding how to create a dark shape, a light shape, and render a ball. Now I say render because it's rendering. We're not painting, we're not putting down strokes. We're just softening edges and things like that. I also paint more painterly in my practice, but I learnt from this, and then I moved on to become more painterly. And that, I think, is really key. That if you learn how to paint in a particular way, you can then create your own style, and that's what I have been doing over the last couple of years after I graduated from art school. So without further ado, let's go and have a look at how we create three-dimensionality on a two-dimensional surface, just using one pigment, in this case a raw umber and a titanium white. Okay, so if you joined in the last episode or the last video, we looked at creating a tonal scale. We looked at using a single colour, a raw umber, with a titanium white, and we created this lovely scale. And then on our palette, and then we actually put it onto a piece of canvas. When I was at art school, I did that, and I did it multiple times. My teacher was always making me do a tonal scale before I even started my class, so that I got used to the tones and all that sort of stuff. I'm not going to torture you with that, but that's something I did. It is worthwhile understanding how your tones work. Now what happened was I then created a lovely piece of canvas like this, and I would take this out with me. I would use it, I would have it there on the side of my easel when I was painting in class, just so I could judge my tones and things like that. I even had one where I had little holes in all of them, so that I could then put it up and squint through that hole and see what tone it was. I don't recommend you do that, but it was actually quite a good thing for me to do at the time, for me to get a grip on what tone was and what I needed to do, because at art school they were very specific. I needed to match the tone specifically. I no longer paint like that, but that's what I had to learn, and so I'm not going to torture you with that, but just thought I'd let you know. Okay, so the thing that I'm going to teach you now is I'm going to be teaching you how to use using these tones, just one single tone, to create a three-dimensional ball on a two-dimensional surface. Now when I was at art school, I had a lovely teacher called Ben Smith, and he had a white ball made out of foam where he had all these concentric lines going around it. What was that, concentric? I don't know. And it had these lines going around the ball, so that you could see where the light hit the ball and where the shadow was. Now this is because we're painting a light and shadow painting. When you paint other things, like if you're not painting it, if that's not your intention, if you're not a light and shadow painting, you don't need to know how to do this sort of stuff. But this is what we were learning. We were learning how to paint light and shadow on our 2D surface, and trying to get dimension within those objects. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to move the camera, and I'm going to show you what he did with this ball. Okay, so I hope you can see this. So this is the ball that he would set up, and he would place the ball towards the light. Now you can see I've got lovely light, directional light coming from here, hitting the ball, and you can see this this white the actual shadow. What I'm going to do, just to make that even more clear, I'm going to take this and put it on a white surface so that you can see that, right? So we're looking at that. So what he was showing us was the reason why he had these lovely lines around his white foam ball was to show you where your shadows lie. So you can see in this instance, it's kind of very hard to see, but anyway, in this instance, the light is hitting here and it's coming around the ball and then going back around here. Sorry. Let's see. So the light is hitting the ball here. Oops. And then you can see at about this point here, this is where we're getting into our shadow. So we're coming into shadow. Now the reason why he used a white ball, because it was actually clearer to see. Here it is a little bit difficult, but I sadly don't have a white ball for this demonstration. Hopefully in the future I'll get one and I'll videotape this so that you can see what I'm talking about. So what happens is when you're creating form, particularly with light and shadow, you're basically going to have a light side here and you're going to have a dark side here. And so basically what happens is when you come around, the shadow hits this line here, and as soon as it hits this line here, it's starting to go back away from you, and that's when the light that's coming at directional lines towards your ball, it's coming in straight lines here. So light doesn't bend, it comes down in straight lines. It can't go around, can't get around here because it's coming down here and you can't get around. So that's when you've got this lovely core shadow that comes up and around here and it follows the outer shape of that ball, or outer shape of the object, but in this case it's this round side. So this here is your core shadow, and it keeps going around, and then you'll get reflected light coming back in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint this ball using that understanding of how light works and understanding what these concentric lines are doing, okay? And we're going to use our lovely tones that we created here. We're going to use these tones to create a three-dimensional sphere on a two-dimensional surface. So let's get to that. Okay, so now what we're going to do with that understanding of how light works when it hits a surface and how it doesn't bend around things, it basically comes down at angles, and then you get these lovely things called core shadows, or just shadows where the form goes back in space and you're not getting the light going there. That's where your shadow line is. We're going to use that understanding. We're going to render a three-dimensional surface on this two-dimensional, a three-dimensional shape on this two-dimensional surface. So get my ball out of the way, set it up over on my thing. You can't see that, but anyway, it's set up over there. And I'm going to initially draw the ball. Now, when I paint these days, I don't draw in pencil on my surface, but that is a preference. That's how I like to paint. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw where I think the core shadow is. So it's coming around the surface like this. And as I mentioned, the shadow of your round object, the shadow of your shape, follows the outer edge of it. So if this is your shape and it's coming around, so you've got a round shape, right? The actual shadow is going to follow that outer edge, okay? It's not going to go like this. It's not going to go like this, because if you go like that, you're going to create a hole. And I'll show you how that works. So I hope you can see this. I'm just going to draw it in really, really thick. So this is my round ball. And this is my light's going to hit here. So this is my light. It's going to be my lightest light, and this is going to be another section. So my shadow is, and again I've got another thing like this, and then I've got my shadow shape coming through. Okay. Okay, so that's how I would draw my shape ready to paint. So I'm going to pick up my darkest color in this section. So this is how I would have to do it when I was learning how to paint. I would have to put in I could go from my light to my dark or my dark to my light. So I'm going to go, in this case, I'm going to go from my dark to my light. And I know that my darkest dark is going to be right here, just as it comes in to that shape there. Because it gets no light, okay? So I just want to put that down, just to give myself an indication. I also know that my lightest light, my highlight, is going to sit kind of like on this edge about here. So my lightest light is that, and that's going to be my titanium white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually paint this section of my ball in, and I'm going to do it using the tones here. So not going to use my white because my white's my highlight. I'm going to pick up this tone here, and I'm going to paint this section of the ball. Okay, and then I'm going to get my next one, which is this one, and I'm going to paint this section here. Oh, I might not have enough paint on that one, but that's okay. I pick up my next one. And basically all I'm doing is I'm creating, just painting around this shape. And this is what I had to do. I used to have to paint this ball, to draw it as well. Get to my next color, bring it in. Okay, and then further. Okay, now we have to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then my last one, I'm going to paint this whole thing in this thing. This is going to be my core, my darkest dark, my shadow shape. Okay, that's mine. And then, as I said, this section here is my darkest dark, so I'm going to put that pretty much pure colour, which actually, sorry, it's not pretty much, my pure colour right there, and then my core shadow, I'm going to use that, my shadow, I'm going to have that across there. And as it gets away from there, it gets lighter again, so I'm going to come back down here, and I'm going to, because it gets softer on the edges of your shadow, not as dark. Okay? Alright. So at the moment it's looking very bitsy, like as you can sort of see, it's like, I can see all these pieces here. So then what I would have to do is I'd come in with a clean brush, but I'm just going to wipe my brush off, and I would soften all those edges. Because if I soften those edges, I start, actually grab a different brush. If I soften those edges, it'll start looking rounder. If I need more paint, I know where to go in, like that. And I can soften that edge. Same thing, soften this edge. edge. So I'm just basically softening those edges. And do you see how that looks quite round now? Now obviously, as I said, in this section here, in the dark section, my core shadow, I have a thing called reflected light. The reflected light comes down, it hits the table surface and it bounces back up. Whatever sits near here is going to be reflected up into here. So it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be lighter than anything in the shadow, but it's not going to be as light as things that are in this high light. So this here is the color that I used, isn't it? Yep, this is the color I used in my shadow. I'm going to take this color here and I'm going to grab a bit of this color, because this is in the light, and put it in here. It's very, very subtle. Can you see that? And that's my reflected light in through there. So that is how I would have to create, that's how I would create a 3D, oh, sorry, forgot one thing. And then my highlight. Pick up my highlight and I'll put that there and then soften that as well. Okay. So can you see how that, the more I do it, obviously this is very quick, but this is how you create that lovely 3D surface on a two-dimensional surface, by understanding shadows, core shadows and reflected light and where the light hits and all that sort of stuff, and using this tonal scale by just doing that. These days I don't paint like that. I paint quite differently. I don't mix all my tones up. I actually just paint very, very quickly, and I find this way a lot easier. And I'm going to show it to you because I think that you can practice this. This is something I want you to go and do. I want you to go and mix up all your tones and try and create this ball. Okay, using that. The way I do it now is pretty simple. So I won't normally draw my shapes, my actual composition on my surface in pencil. I do it very, very differently, but just for the demonstration purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to do what I did in that one. Okay, so again, we know that this here is my core shadow and this is my light. So what do I do these days? Right, so these days I'm going to take shadow shape. I just mix up a shadow shape and I paint my shadow shape down. Honestly, I don't have a lot of paint here, and I highly recommend you guys mix up a big batch if you're going to do this. I'll just put some white in that so it's crap. Ah! All good, all good. To learn how to paint, you need paint. If you don't use paint, you can't learn how to paint, okay? So basically I paint this whole entire thing like that. I even then include my shadow shape and paint it all as one shape. Obviously if I'm using colour, I will change the colours in here, but I'm using one tone to create that whole thing. All right. And then I pick up and I'm going to use a light shape. Mix my colour on the fly. is going to be the light side of my thing. A little bit lighter. I'll paint it right up to the edge of that shape. My shadow shape, my core shadow. Try to get rid of all that white on the canvas. And I'm trying to put a lot of paint on here. Okay. Right. So that's got my light side and my dark side. So now, how do I make it look 3D? So basically what I do is I then start blending this edge here. And I can blend it by either picking up the shadow shape and dragging it into my light shape, or vice versa, the light shape into my shadow shape. So I'm just going to pick this up and I'm just going to soften this edge. Grab that. And by softening that edge, I'm creating a different tone. Creating all these tones that I've created here. Yeah, you see that? Okay, so as you can see, if I keep on blending this thing, I can use a smaller brush or whatever, softening that edge. And how much I soften it is totally up to me. I can actually pick up more of this pigment and bring it in. I'm creating a different tone. All those tones, I don't have to actually mix them up as much that I can just do it on the fly. You see? It's already looking three-dimensional. I can grab more of the shadow shape if I want, and I can drag it into the light, or vice versa, as I said. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is I need to put in my highlight and my reflected light. So I'll start with my reflected light. I will grab, this is my dark shape here, my dark tone. As you can see, this is my dark pigment. And I'm just going to lighten that slightly. So I'm going to grab that and lighten it slightly. It's still going to be darker than, still has to be darker than anything that's in the light, but can be lighter than that shadow. If I can put, light here, there's nothing there. Breaks up that space. And then in my light side, I can put in my highlight. So I grab my light colour, put it down, blend it out. And that is how you create, well, I create these days, that 3D surface on a 2D thing without having to do all that mixing. Just creating a shadow shape, a light shape, and then putting in reflected light and things like that. I can then come into this, I've got my shadow, this is my shadow shape here. I can then go, okay, no, I want a dark, that dark little thing under here. I can then put that in. light doesn't get, and then blend it out. But it's much faster, and I don't have to mix up all my colours beforehand. I don't like mixing all my colours beforehand. I'm not that kind of painter. I like to paint as I go and pick things up, and this to me feels much more natural. And soften the edges of mine. Shadow shape. And that's how I create 3D shape on a 2D surface these days. And I think it can be more painterly as well. I mean, I was dabbing a lot because this surface is this is just like a piece of canvas paper. I was dabbing a lot, but normally I will be putting my paints down in quite a deliberate manner. But you can see that just by blending on the actual canvas, I'm creating different colors, I'm creating interest, diversity, without actually having to do this kind of thing where I actually have to then come in and just basically I'm rendering. This is called rendering, whereas this is more painterly. Okay. So basically now what I want you to do is I want you to go off and do the same thing. I want you to initially, as we did in the previous video, I want you to create your tones from dark to light and then render a ball. And then once you've done that, I want you to mix up just a dark shape, a shadow shape and a light shape and create a ball this way and see which one you feel more comfortable with. And if you prefer painting like this, you prefer actually mixing up all your tones beforehand, go right ahead, do it, because that is who you are as a painter. I'm not that sort of painter, I am this sort of painter, and that's why I gravitate towards this way of painting. Anyway, I hope you had fun with it, and off you go. Okay, so I hope that was really informative for you. I hope you could see how just one tone creates that three-dimensionality. So tone did all the work in that. I can then come up back over the top of that and put colour on it. Or I could create just colour, a separate colour ball, and it will still work. And I will do that in another video. So in the next video, what we're going to look at is how to use this understanding of creating three-dimensionality in an actual little still life painting. I think I'm going to be creating a, what do you call it? A mandarin on a flat surface, just for you to understand how this all works. Okay, see you then.